What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Good Wolf Project. I'm your host, Jerry Scarlato, and today I want to talk to you about the importance of understanding second and third order consequences. Because just by understanding this basic idea, you can start to move yourself forward more effectively and make better decisions for your future and potentially the future of those around you. This basic idea, understanding and being able to think past your immediate self or what's going to happen today, just being able to do that is the big difference between people who are successful and people who aren't. And that's in any endeavor. That's in making money, that's in business, that's in health, that's in any endeavor. People who can look past the immediate outcome that they're going to get right now will generally be able to make better decisions and be able to achieve more down the road. And that's really why this is such an important topic, so that you can understand the effects of your decisions. Another thing to think about when it comes to second and third order consequence, or another reason this is important, is because not only do the decisions that we make today only affect today, but sometimes we're making decisions based on emotional attachment or moral attachment, and we're not making decisions again on what is the rational decision to make. If we're making a decision based on a moral or emotional attachment because we are emotionally attached to a thing, 9 times out of 10 we're making it based on first order consequences, which is us feeling good about it because we are morally or emotionally attached to it, versus what the actual outcome of the decision is going to be. This primarily, but not only, is very apparent in politics, which I will give as an example here in a little bit. But when you make decisions based on your emotions and attaching your emotions or your morals primarily, I'm not talking about, of course, like, we all have morals and values and we all make decisions through that lens. But the question is that your only lens? Is that your main lens? And how have your decisions so far in your life led to good outcomes? If your main lens is making decisions through morals and emotions, and your life is not where you want it to be, then it means you should make different decisions. It means you're not recognizing the second and third order consequences of those decisions, of those choices. That's why this conversation and this idea is so important. It is so important to grasp onto so that you can have better outcomes in your life down the road. Not only in your life, but potentially in the lives of those around you as well. But before we get to that, I'll encourage you to hit that pause button real quick and to go give us a quick review or subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. Remember, as always, the more reviews we have, the more subscribers we have, the more people that we reach. So I greatly appreciate you guys taking 10 seconds to do that, to help us grow, to help us expand, and to help us reach more people so that they can also understand the importance of second and third order consequences. So what are second and third order consequences? I've kind of alluded to it already at the beginning of this, but they are the things that happen after you've made a decision. Not immediately after, that's the first order consequence. They are the things that happen down the road, typically at least a day, 10 days, potentially a year, potentially 10 years even, down the road. Now, I'm not suggesting that every decision that you make should be based on what's going to happen in 10 years. I'm not suggesting that you should get out a pen and paper and sit and write down the pros and cons of every decision that you make. But the important decisions in life, especially when you're trying to make changes or especially when you're trying to achieve something in your life, those decisions should be thought through. And it may not require a pen and paper for you to do it, but at least taking a second to go, what's going to happen after I make this decision? So, for instance, I'll give 2 examples to help make this connection so that we can start to see how our lives change or our outcomes change based on the decisions that we make today. Because everything that has happened to you where you are in your life right now, in this moment, as you're listening to this or watching this, where you are is based on all of the decisions and behaviors and actions and beliefs and thoughts that you have had up until this point. All of them are. It's where you are today is based on that. So if you understand that, then you can understand that you can start to make different decisions, but it requires you understanding or thinking through what those decisions, what the outcomes of those decisions could lead to. So, one example, and I think 95% of the people listening to this, actually, it would probably be pretty damn close to 100% of people listening to this can directly relate to this example. So, when it comes to nutrition, many people quit or fail at nutrition because of losing perspective of second and third order consequences. Here's how. Let's say you've been on a diet for about 3 weeks and you've done a good job, and you told yourself, you gave yourself a rule that you were only going to eat outside of your diet on, say, Saturdays. But let's say it's Wednesday and your friends want you to go out with them and get some drinks and have a good time. Up until then, you've been able to say no, but now you're going to give yourself a reward, if you will, by going out with them, by going and having a good time. Oh, it's Wednesday. Yes, I'm breaking the rule that I set for myself, but it's no big deal because I've done a great job for 3 weeks, and I might as well reward myself for it. Might as well pat myself on the back for the great job that I've done up until this point. Up until today, only a month into me trying to change my nutrition. That decision is making a decision based on first order consequences, based on you feeling good or you rewarding yourself for having done a good job by sticking to your word for 3 weeks, and by basically going back and doing the same thing you were doing before that. Likely, before that 3-week period of time, Wednesdays was maybe a normal day for you to go out with your friends and party and drink and stuff your face. Or at least 1 or 2 days throughout the week you would do that. So it makes you feel good because it's something that you used to do, and it's also you're convincing yourself that it is a reward. So you're basing it on instant gratification. It makes you feel good in the moment, and that's what you're basing that decision on. What you're losing sight of is the second order and third order consequences that comes after making that decision. So the hardest thing for people to understand when it comes to making nutritional change, this is any change, but nutritional change is that it's not just about changing the food that you're eating. I mean, clearly that's the external factor, but it's about changing who you think you are. The second that you step your toes back into the water of who you're trying to move away from, so over here on the left side is a puddle of water. That's who you were. And over here on the right side is a pond of water, and that's where you're trying to go. So when you decide to go out with your friends on Wednesday to celebrate and reward yourself, and because it feels good, you're dipping your toes back into the puddle of water that is who you used to be. And as soon as you feel that puddle of water and it feels very comfortable to you and it feels very certain to you and it feels like something that you remember and you enjoyed the way it felt and you liked it a lot, as soon as you do that, you start to reinforce that action again. You start to reinforce that person again. Because creating habits is not about the habit in and of itself. It is about becoming a new person. So the second order consequence is that you have already dipped your toes into old you. You're reinforcing old you. You are going back toward or moving back toward the version of yourself that you're trying so damn hard to move away from. The third order consequence comes probably the next week, potentially a week later, where you go, yeah, I mean, your friends ask you to go out again, and you're like, well, last week I went out, and it wasn't a big deal. I was able to eat again on just fine on Thursday and Friday. So yeah, I'll go ahead and do it again. And then you do it again. And then the week after that, you do it again. And then before you know it, you're actually not following through on anything that you said before. And you've completely fallen off the wagon. And you've convinced yourself that it is because, well, I guess I just didn't really like that diet. Or, the timing was bad. I'm pretty busy at work right now. And, a lot going on with the kids and soccer practice. Or whatever justification you've given yourself. That's what you think or you've told yourself is the reason why things didn't work out with your diet. But what really happened was that very first decision. That first decision when you decided to give in and not follow through with your word and to dip your toes back into that nasty ass water that you're trying to move away from. That's where it started. But all you were focused on in that decision was the first order consequence. I want to feel good in this moment, so I'm going to go ahead and go out with my buddies. Instead of recognizing or thinking through, well, if I do this, then what happens? Well, I told myself I would only go off my diet on Saturdays, and it's not a Saturday. So there's that. I'm not following through with what I say, so I'm not reinforcing myself. I'm not telling myself that I'm the type of person that follows through with the word that I say that I'm going to do. That's number one. Number two, what else could happen? Well, I could trick myself into thinking that this is okay, and I could tell myself that this is something that I can do normally. So there's that also. Number three, well, I've only done it for 3 weeks, and while that seems like a long time, 3 weeks is really not that long, considering you don't really see true, sustainable, lasting change in health and fitness until about a year in. 3 weeks, it's a short period of time. So to reward myself after 3 weeks, it just doesn't make as much sense. I'm really just trying to rationalize it. And that's thinking through second and third order consequences. That's trying to figure out what comes from me making this decision instead of just diving in and giving in to instant gratification. So that's one example that I think everybody can resonate with, whether that's been in nutrition, whether that's been in exercise, in some form of health. Most people have tried and failed because they've started to fall off, quote, fall off the wagon, quote unquote. There's a fucking wagon. You do it or you don't do it. If you don't understand, you become a different person. That's what you're trying to do, is become a different person. And you try to convince yourself that you can dip your toes back into that nasty ass water, you're going to have a hard time. And that's why thinking through those second and third order consequences in those situations is so important, because that's what kills so many journeys in health and fitness, is that alone. Well, I'll skip my workout today. It's fine. I've done a good job. I've showed up the last couple of workouts. I'll reward myself and skip. Wrong answer. Wrong answer. Second, third order consequence is always you will skip again and then you will fail. That's that. All because of one decision. But you won't link it to that. You'll link it to something else. Okay. That's one example. Again, I think most people can resonate with. So before we get into the second example, I'm going to go ahead and take a drink of my Perrier. Nice sparkling water. Very tasty. Yes. Okay. I'm also looking at my notes at the same time. If you're watching me on YouTube, I have my notes on a whiteboard next to me. So just to make sure I'm covering the points that I want to cover. All right. The second example is a little more involved, but it's worth thinking about. It is very much worth thinking about because it kind of dictates how society will be ran. So there's a presidential election in the United States coming up in October of this year, here in just a couple months, 3 or 4 months. And so people are thinking through the things that are important to them, the things that, they want to make decisions on, the topics, and why, what are the hot topics during the debates and everything, or how are you going to make a decision? How are you going to base your decision? where society is right now, there are two camps. One camp is, I'm making a decision because I want to vote against Donald Trump. The other camp is, I'm voting for Donald Trump. And then, of course, there's everywhere in between, which those are the people, it's the between people that are going to really make the decision on whether a Democrat or Republican gets elected, or RFK Jr., which is less likely. But it's the people in the middle that really will make that decision. And those are the ones that really, I mean, in each one of those corners, I mean, please listen to this as well, but the people in the middle, especially thinking through second order consequences, is super important. So for both of those people, I'm no matter who it is, I'm voting against Trump, and I'm voting for Trump no matter what. For both of those people, you're making a decision based on moral or emotional attachment, a first order consequence. That's what you're making a decision on, nothing else, nothing further. Not nothing, but very, very little after that. There's very little you're making a decision on after that. You're not thinking through, well, if I don't vote for, if I'm going to vote for Donald Trump no matter who this person is. If a dictator steps in and says, hey, I'm going to come and dictate and I'm going to rule the world and, you're all going to become slaves. And you're like, yeah, that's fine. As long as I don't have to vote for Donald Trump. Yeah, you kind of go, okay, well, that doesn't seem like it makes sense, but whatever. I'm not even going to say that. Not whatever you want. Like, think about it. To say or think that no matter who this is on this side, I'm going to vote against Donald Trump, that's voting with or thinking through first order consequences almost alone. You're not even thinking about the ramifications of that. What happens over the next 4 years with whatever human being stands on that side. On the other side, too, even still. And I'm a registered independent. I am a libertarian at heart, but I lean conservative, and I will fully admit that. And if you listen to this podcast, you probably understand that. But even still, if you are a person who's like, I'm voting for Donald Trump. Donald Trump comes out tomorrow, and he's like, hey, listen, guys, here's what I'm going to do. And it goes against some of your morals and values. And you're like, you're going to vote for that guy anyway. Like, it's being able to think through consequences, being able to think about what's going to happen next. What's going to happen if I make this decision? It's not, well, it's because I'm morally against this person that I'm going to vote against him. No matter what, no matter who's here, I'm morally against him. What happens next? What happens because of that? Here's a perfect example of voting through other moral topics and ideas. One of the big topics that people will vote on is abortion. And if you look at, for instance, posters around a city, any city, what do they put on their poster? Actually, the only other thing that I've seen on a poster outside of the name and maybe the party that they're a part of is pro-life, pro-choice, whatever. That's the only other thing that I've seen. And that tells me that those people understand that people will make an emotional, moral decision. Doesn't matter if you know what else that person believes. It doesn't matter if you understand the financial decisions that that person will make for you. But because you know that they're pro-life, pro-choice, whatever, because you know that, you'll vote for them. Well, Jerry, it's not, I don't care about money. Why? That's not the most important thing in life. Well, no, it's not. You're right. 100%. The question is, what's the second and third order consequences that comes from the government taking money from you? This is basically my argument for why financial decisions should be the number one thing on your list when it comes to looking at candidates for any political office, for that matter. Of course, it's not because money is the most important thing. I totally agree. It's part of a good life, but it's certainly not the most important thing. I will 100% agree with that general statement. Where that gets slippery is when the government starts to take your money and then shift it in a different direction. They can then tell you that it is big corporations that are taking your money. It is business, big business that is taking your money. But if you don't see the sleight of hand that happens from them taking your money to them eventually getting paid, if you don't see that sleight of hand, then you don't know any better. The next thing that happens is your freedom starts to go away, because the less money you have, the more money you're giving to the government, the less freedom you have, and the more power they have to then do whatever the hell they want with you. So the second and third order consequences that come from the government taking money, taking more money, taxing more, taking more, or putting in initiatives that keep it and make it harder for you to make money, or to keep people out of jobs, or to encourage you to not work. Less power you have, more power they have. Second and third order consequences. The second and third order consequences of any decision are worth thinking through. So when you're thinking about what are the important morals and values that I want to follow when it comes to making a decision based on a candidate, what are the things I want to base my decision on? Do I agree? Do I disagree? What's the number one topic? I'm not here to tell you what your number one topic should be. That's fine. You make it whatever you want to make it. But if you're overlooking the importance of finances because you're like, oh, money's not the most important thing, fine. If that's what you want to think and believe, that's totally fine. But what's the second and third order consequences of that decision? What happens because you're like, oh, they can keep taking my money? Okay. If they keep doing that, you have less power, you have less freedom, you have less potential to do things. And then they can very easily circle back around and go, yeah, I don't know. Big companies just keep taking your money because they keep raising prices, and here's what keeps happening. But what you're missing is the sleight of hand. What you're missing is what's happening in the left hand while they're taking money with the right hand. That's what you're missing. Thinking through second and third order consequences. Okay, and those are just two examples, the nutrition example, the political example. Those are just two examples of how being able to think through things and what happens next and what is the outcome going to be, how they can have an impact on your life. The nutrition thing is very straightforward. It is directly going to impact you. The financial thing seems less important, or the political thing, because it's like, it doesn't matter because I'm one of 375 million people in the United States. And so, what's it matter if one person's just like, I'm just going to make a moral decision? Well, the thing is, a lot of people do that. A lot of people just make moral or emotional decisions. So if you can start to be a person who just thinks through things, who just goes, yeah, okay, well, what if this time I just chose to do something different and thought through the decisions I was making? What's the next thing that happens if I make it based only on this? What's the thing that happens after that? If you come up with the same conclusion, great, fine. At least you thought through it. But there's a chance that you'll come up with a different conclusion. And that's what scares people. Honestly, that's what scares people, is coming up with a different conclusion. So, all that aside, how do we start to change and make sure that we're not making decisions based only on first order consequences, and we start to think through what happens with our decisions? First, again, it's worth reiterating that not all decisions need to have this big intricate, do I use a red ink or black ink for this? No, and that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm suggesting. So first is, what is the decision based around? If you're trying to make a change in your life, if you're trying to improve your health, if you're trying to improve your wealth, if you're trying to improve your relationship, if you're trying to make make better choices in your life, and you for a second think about conceding for a moment, giving in to instant gratification, think about the second and third order consequences that come with that. Those are some of the most important areas to think through things. When you're trying to make a change, the issue comes when you start to concede to the old version of you. When you start to give into that person and feed that person again. That's where the issue arises. It's not because of schedules, it's not because of, things happening here and things happening there. Yeah, life is always difficult, life is always challenging, life will always be hard, nothing will ever line up for you. You will always have to work through it. That's the fucking way that it is. So you have to decide if you're going to just work through it, if you're going to figure it out. So what area of life are you making a decision on? And if it's an area where you're trying to improve and trying to make yourself better, think very hard about what happens next. If it's an area that's going to impact your life, like politics, if it's an area like that, think through what happens next. And some of us are more moral than others. We all have different morals and values. Try to think as reasonably and rationally as possible, meaning for just a second, take your morals, set them aside, take your emotions and set them aside. And then ask questions and then think through things. Okay? Because when you have that emotion just stacked on top of it, you can't think. It's just nearly impossible. Okay, so start with that. Start with understanding that this isn't about thinking through every single decision. This isn't about thinking through every single process. It's about knowing where the big decisions are in your life and not getting in your own damn way during those decisions. Okay, next. So how do you start to improve those things? There's two ways you can do that. Questions is always the best place to start. And the first and most basic question is, and then what? If I make this decision, then what happens? What happens next? What comes after this decision? And be real with yourself. Again, don't justify, well, if I go and drink and have a good time with my friends, after that, I'm going to have a great time and I'm going to be happy and so on and so forth. No, you won't. No, you won't, because you've done it before and you've beat yourself up and you told yourself you're a bad person and you told yourself, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this because I'm just not able to, I guess I'm just not meant to be healthy, blah, 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 whatever the bullshit that you tell yourself. That's what's going to happen. So be real. If I make the decision, then what happens? And then think in time frames. Don't just think about tomorrow. You can use the rule of 10. Think about 10 days down the road. Think about 10 weeks down the road. Think about 10 months down the road. Think about 10 years down the road. If I make this decision to go out with my friends today, in 10 days, how will I feel about it? In 10 weeks, how will I feel about it? And how will it have affected me? 10 months, 10 years. If I make this political decision, if I make this vote, if I make based on this decision, and it actually goes the way that I want it to go, and I don't pay attention to anything else, and I'm okay with all these other things potentially happening, what happens? 10 days, 10 weeks, 10 months, 10 years. Okay? What happens next? And then open up your time frames. Think down the road. Don't just think about what happens today. Because it is that instant gratification thinking that just wipes dreams off the table. Just like two-hand, woof, wipes them off the table. And if you want to become the kind of person who actually has a life that they find fulfilling and purposeful and abundant, it requires making different decisions and requires taking time to think. That's what I got. Think through the consequences. Think about what happens next. Change your life. I guarantee you it will change your life. There's absolutely zero question in my mind. Until next time, here's to your 1% growth every day.